All right, guys, we got an emergency special edition of the show for you here. So I finally found the time to go through Jack Smith's testimony to the House Judiciary Committee. So first, let me give you some backstory on this. This has been released as a 255-page document that has all of the questions and his answers on his various cases against Donald Trump. But you also have, I believe it's an 8-hour video that was dropped, which shows, the recording and everything that was said. Now, I want to say up front, this is super duper important. If you have the time, read the 255-page document or watch the 8-hour video. Obviously, if you do it on 1.5 times speed or 2 times speed, you can see it, much faster. But it is absolutely positively worth it because there is some bombshell stuff in here. Now, also, let me point out, there's a reason why they dropped this on New Year's. They dropped it on New Year's. It's an old trick that they use in Washington to try to hide stories that they don't want out there. So, of course, Republicans control the committee, and they decided if we drop it on New Year's, maybe nobody will notice, maybe nobody will go through it, maybe the story will blow over. But I'm here to tell you, I went through it, and there's a lot of catastrophic information in there that I'm about to share with you right now. So right off the bat here, before I continue, everybody do me a huge favor. Subscribe to the channel. Click that bell icon. That helps the channel out a lot because YouTube does not like promoting political videos and spreading them through the algorithm. But if you hit the bell icon, you can go around and subvert that algorithm and get the stuff delivered to you immediately as it drops. Support the show on Patreon or tip on YouTube. You can also sign up for Crystal Kyle and Friends on Substack. We have a great episode of that coming today. You don't want to miss it. And also go sub to Corin's World where we do live Kyle and Corin episodes Mondays at 8:30. All right, guys, let me go ahead and jump right in. So let's start with this. This is just very straightforward, very to the point. Jack Smith is asked whether or not he believed he had sufficient evidence to sustain a conviction against Donald Trump. So they're not asking about just an indictment here. They're saying, do you think you had enough to convict him? And here's what he says.
Mr. Smith, let's just start with the bottom line up front. One of your investigations focused on whether any person violated the law in connection with efforts to interfere in the lawful transfer of power following the 2020 election. Is that correct?
Yes.
At the conclusion of that investigation related to the interference in the lawful transfer of power following the 2020 election, when your office indicted Mr. Trump for his criminal scheme to overturn the 2020 election, did you believe that you had sufficient evidence to obtain and sustain a conviction against Mr. Donald Trump?
Yes.
For these charges stemming from Mr. Trump's criminal scheme to overturn the 2020 election, did you believe that you had sufficient evidence to prove these charges beyond a reasonable doubt?
Yes.
And we know that it's more than just a reasonable doubt. Did you believe that there were multiple substantial federal interests in proceeding with prosecuting Mr. Trump after he attempted to criminally overturn the 2020 election?
I did.
Damn. Now, I always told you guys, too. I went through the whole indictment when it initially came out, and Jack Smith really appeared to dot all his I's and cross all his T's, and he did a tremendous job, and the indictment was incredibly thorough. So based off my interpretation of that, I felt like what he says here is correct, that this was the case that absolutely would have nailed Trump's ass to the wall. And remember, guys, it's not like he was actually Teflon because he had already lost a number of civil cases, right? Letitia James also hammered his ass and got him on business fraud and tax fraud and insurance fraud and all sorts of stuff. And never mind the E. Jean Carroll sexual assault lawsuit. But we're just getting started here. Now, let's go to this one. Bill Madden says, holy fuck, showing zero fear of retribution from a vengeance-obsessed traitor who attempted to overturn the 2020 presidential election, usurp the Constitution, and overthrow the U.S. government. Jack Smith, with zero fucks left to give, is what a badass American hero looks like. Watch this one.
For nearly 3 decades, I've been a career prosecutor. I've served during both Republican and Democratic administrations, and I've been guided by those principles in every role I've held. I continued to honor those principles when I was appointed to serve as special counsel in November of 2022. The decision to bring charges against President Trump was mine, but the basis for those charges rests entirely with President Trump and his actions, as alleged in the indictments returned by grand juries in 2 different districts. Our investigation developed proof beyond a reasonable doubt that President Trump engaged in a criminal scheme to overturn the results of the 2020 election and to prevent the lawful transfer of power. Our investigation also developed powerful evidence that showed that President Trump willfully retained highly classified documents after he left office in January of 2021, storing them at his social club, including in a ballroom and a bathroom. He then repeatedly tried to obstruct justice to conceal his continued retention of those documents. I remain grateful for the counsel, judgment, and advice of my team as I executed my responsibilities. I am both saddened and angered that President Trump has sought revenge against career prosecutors, FBI agents, and support staff simply for doing their jobs and for having worked on those cases. These dedicated public servants are the best of us, and they have been wrongly vilified and improperly dismissed from their jobs. I made my decisions in the investigation without regard to President Trump's political association, activities, beliefs, or candidacy in the 2024 presidential election. We took our actions based on the facts and the law, the very lessons I learned early in my career as a prosecutor. We followed Justice Department policies and observed legal requirements. The timing and speed of our work reflects the strength of the evidence and our confidence that we would have secured convictions at trial. If asked whether to prosecute a former president based on the same facts today, I would do so regardless of whether that president was a Republican or a Democrat.
Damn. Now remember, he wanted all of this to be shown live in real time. He wanted to answer questions in front of the world live in real time. The Republicans slapped that down, and the Republicans hid this and again released it on New Year's Eve. You should be asking yourself, if the Republicans have nothing to hide, why did they try to bury this during a holiday? It's very clear they do have a lot to hide here, but I'm just getting started. So now we go to this one. This case, Camille McKenzie says, this case was 100% the one that Trump ran to avoid going to jail for, and the GOP elected him off the lie that the 2020 election was stolen. It never was, and the facts are that Trump is the one who tried to steal it and failed. Smith's witness statements and evidence came directly from Republicans that weren't willing to lie for Trump. Judge Cannon deliberately delayed and dismissed this case to protect Trump. He should have been put on trial instead of voters electing a felon to the White House. By the way, I think this is not only correct, but if there's a Supreme Court seat opening, look for Trump to pick Judge Cannon. Because my suspicion is there's some sort of a quid pro quo between Trump and Judge Cannon because she bent over backwards to protect him in clearly unethical ways. All right, now here we go. Listen to what Jack Smith says here.
One of the strengths of our case and why we felt we had such strong proof is our witnesses were not going to be political enemies of the president. They were going to be political allies. We had numerous witnesses who would say, I voted for President Trump. I campaigned for President Trump. I wanted him to win. The Speaker of the House in Arizona, the Speaker of the House in Michigan. We had an elector in Pennsylvania who is a former congressman who was going to be an elector for President Trump, who said that what they were trying to do was an attempt to overthrow the government and illegal. Our case was built on, frankly, Republicans who put their allegiance to the country before the party. And so the president got information from people he trusted on other issues. He rejected it whenever it didn't fit him staying in office. And there was a pattern in our case where anytime any information came in that would mean he could no longer be president, he would reject it. And any theory, no matter how far-fetched, no matter how not based in law, that would indicate that he could, he latched onto that. And we were confident that we had very strong proof of that pattern. He also, I would just add, very consciously did not try to reach out to the sort of people who have the most expertise on these issues. He reached out to people who he thought could back him up.
Wow, holy cow. Now do you see why they buried this? Now do you see why they buried this? Okay, all right. I got more for you, though. The intellectualist says, Jack Smith on Trump's behavior on January 6th. And he said the following. Here we go.
But it's pretty significant to subpoena the Speaker of the House's toll records, right?
We followed department policy, and we followed all legal requirements in getting those records.
I mean, to get the information you're looking for, nobody disputed the Speaker and the President were having communications on January 6th. So one way you could have gotten that information is you could have asked the Speaker's lawyer to look at his phone records and to give you the information you needed, right?
Well, you say now that nobody's disputing, but my experience in criminal investigations is that people often at trial dispute things that you never thought were going to be in dispute during the investigation. And so when I conduct a criminal investigation, I don't assume there will be no disputes. Having a record that is a hard record about a time and the timeline of that afternoon was particularly important because that violence started. The president refused to stop it. He endangered the life of his vice president. Then he's getting calls, and not calls from Democrats, not calls from people he doesn't know, calls from people he trusts, calls from people he relies on, and still refuses to come to the aid of the people at the Capitol. That's very important evidence for criminal intent in our case.
Wow. All right, more. Jack Smith destroys the myth that Trump's fraud lies are protected speech. So what they were going to do, what the Trump team was going to do, is use the defense of free speech, free speech, free speech. I'm allowed to say what I want. I'm allowed to believe the election was stolen. There's nothing criminal about that in any way, shape, or form. This was going to be their defense. And Jack Smith is going to meticulously break down here how that defense does not stand when what's being alleged is fraud. Listen to this.
As I sit here right now, I can't remember specific conversations. I do remember that we knew that a sort of First Amendment defense would be part of the case. And I think when I mentioned to you earlier about how to frame the case, we want to make clear that this was not about trying to interfere with anyone's First Amendment rights, that this was a fraud. And as you know, under Supreme Court precedent, fraud is not protected by the First Amendment. And so in my mind, it was important to make that clear in the indictment. And that's why when we litigated this issue before the district court, we prevailed.
Which, by the way, if you're going to make a First Amendment case, why can't Bernie Madoff? Why couldn't he have made a First Amendment case? Okay, yeah, I'm a con man. Yeah, I'm a scammer, but I was just using my speech, and then you're the one who gave me your money, which I proceeded to steal. So, hey, I have a right to say whatever I want to say. That's free speech, but that's not free speech because fraud is at the heart of this. That is a crime.
The president's statements that he believed the election was rife with fraud, those certainly are statements that are protected by the First Amendment, correct?
Absolutely not if they are made to target a lawful government function and they're made with knowing falsity. No, they're not. That was my point about fraud not being protected by the First Amendment.
I mean, there's a long list of disputed elections. I mean, the election of 1800, 1960, year 2000, where candidates believe they were wronged by because they lost. And there's a long history of candidates speaking out about they believe there's been fraud, there's been other problems with the integrity of the election process. And I think you would agree that those types of statements are sort of at the core of the First Amendment rights of a presidential candidate, right?
There is no historical analog for what President Trump did in this case. As we said in the indictment, he was free to say that he thought he won the election. He was even free to say falsely that he won the election. But what he was not free to do was violate federal law and use knowingly false statements about election fraud to target a lawful government function.
Mm-hmm. And here's the point, Jack Smith was able to prove that Trump knew what he was saying was fraudulent, that he knew he was wrong. There's multiple pieces of evidence that validate that fact. Like when he was trying to prod Mike Pence to do the same thing, and Mike Pence said he wouldn't do it, and Trump says, "You're too honest, Mike." In other words, I know I'm full of shit. I know you're telling the truth, but I'm going to go out there and pretend to the world like I think I won the election, right? That's the point, is he could prove that Trump was knowingly making fraudulent arguments and using that to try to keep himself in power. It's criminal. Now on the fake elector scheme, which to me is the biggest smoking gun in terms of proving that there was, a detailed conspiracy and multiple crimes here. Listen to this.
Made clear in our indictment that there are proper ways to dispute an election, and asking for an audit, which President Trump did, and I believe in only 2 of the states that were in question, that's a way you can do that. Filing lawsuits, completely legal and proper way to do that. But in this case, those lawsuits were part of our proof that put President Trump and his co-conspirators on notice. The suits, the results, and the things that court said in finding those suits without merit were one component of evidence that put him on notice that these allegations were false. Also, there were instances where there were pretextual lawsuits. There was one lawsuit, for example, that was filed in New Mexico minutes before the deadline, so they could say there was a dispute in New Mexico so they could proceed forward with the fake electors ballot. There was another lawsuit in Georgia where one of the co-conspirators explicitly said in an email, "We're on notice that the things in this lawsuit aren't accurate, so we shouldn't have the president sign a certification on this lawsuit." And then they played with the language a little and had him sign a certification nonetheless. And so these lawsuits, filing a lawsuit absolutely clearly is something you can do. They were probative evidence of the criminal intent in this case for those limited reasons I just suggested.
Wow. Holy cow. But it gets crazier. Ready? So Rachel Bidikofer points this out. Jack Smith said this in the longer testimony. Again, go watch the whole thing or read the 255-page document. You won't regret it. But this is one of the things he said. Former Republican Congressman Thomas Marino agreed to be a Trump elector, then balked at the fake elector scheme. They had to replace him and others without following the Electoral Count Act's procedures. In a text chain among Trump's operatives, someone ends by saying that, quote, whoever put this slate together should be shot because of the resistance and legal worries it was causing. Electors were told their certificates would only be used if Trump won in court, but the conspirators planned to use them anyway. So they're telling these people, don't worry, what you're doing is totally legal. You're not a fake elector slate. You're an alternate elector slate. If the courts rule against us, we're just not going to use you. That's what they were telling to these people. But in reality, what they said internally to each other is, we're going to use this no matter what. Even if the court rules against us, we're just going to use the fake elector slates, demand that they're perceived as real, and then steal the election. Again, fraud. There's no two ways about that. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. There's no other explanation. The fact that you have these people internally in their own group chats going, whoever put this together should be shot. This is wildly illegal. That says everything. They knew exactly what they were doing. All right, more. Here we go. This one's from Blue Georgia. He posted this one.
Did Attorney General Garland or other DOJ officials direct investigative steps within your office of the special counsel?
No.
Did Attorney General Garland or other DOJ officials direct litigation decisions within your office?
No.
Did you experience Attorney General Garland or other DOJ officials interfering with your ability to conduct this investigation?
No.
Did President Biden ever give you any instructions about what you should or should not do related to these investigations?
No.
Did you ever speak to President Biden about these investigations?
No.
So no direction from Garland, no direction from Joe Biden, and compare that to what Trump was caught doing, where he accidentally posted a tweet thinking he was texting Pam Bondi, saying, you got to do political persecution and lawfare. You got to go after my enemies. Don't let this person get away. They're committing crimes. So Trump is accidentally publicly showing that he's doing lawfare and political persecution. Here, Jack Smith saying, I didn't hear a word from Merrick Garland. I'm a special counsel, so I didn't hear a word from him, and I didn't hear a word from Joe Biden. So all the claims, it's always projection from the right. All the shit they accuse Democrats of doing is what they do. Trump is doing the thing he's saying is evil and bad and wrong, and Jack Smith and Merrick Garland and Joe Biden did not do that thing, okay? Look at this. Jack Smith is forbidden by the corrupt Judge Cannon for now to discuss the really big crimes Trump committed with the classified documents espionage. This exchange from Smith's House testimony shows he's holding back something huge. Smith already said in an October 23rd court filing that he knew what Trump was doing with the classified documents and would prove it in court. I remember that story. We covered it at the time. Well, the answer is in Smith's final report that's being hidden by Cannon, and it destroys Trump. Obviously, Trump shared or sold classified documents with U.S. adversaries. So again, this is in the back and forth. In this testimony that Jack Smith gave. The question was, based on your indictment, is there information that led you to believe that he, Trump, was aware that at least some of these documents are highly sensitive documents? His response to that, Jack Smith's response to that is, yes. Trump knows these are highly classified, highly sensitive documents. Can you draw any conclusions about his refusal to return those documents in spite of having been given multiple opportunities? Jack Smith says, I don't think I can answer that question because it may involve non-public facts that are part of the final report that is currently under an injunction. So the Trump corrupt lackey judge, Judge Cannon, put this information under an injunction. And Jack Smith wants to answer these questions, but he can't because he doesn't want to run afoul of the bullshit injunction. Okay? Question. Okay, can you draw any conclusions about his motive for refusing to return these classified documents? Jack Smith answers, unless you can point me to a public filing on that issue, I don't want to run any risk of running afoul of the injunction. And so without a public filing on that issue, I don't think I can answer that. So what Tom Joseph is saying here is correct. Jack Smith, as part of his case here, he was able to make the legal argument that Trump, it's not a whoopsie that Trump had this classified information, this top secret information. It's not a whoopsie it was in a Mar-a-Lago bathroom and ballroom. No, he knew what he was doing, he took it on purpose, and there was a criminal reason for taking it. The implication here is he was probably selling that information. Could be to Israel, could be to Saudi Arabia, could be to Russia, could be to U.S. allies or adversaries. But illegally selling information is the implication. And because of Judge Cannon, he's not allowed to talk further about that. But clearly, he wants to. Okay, guys, understand that according to Jack Smith here, Trump was 100% going to jail. Like, according to what Jack Smith is saying here, that's it. It's over. I don't even think Jack Smith has ever lost a case, right? And so he was gonna nail his ass to the wall. He caught him dead to rights. I got another one for you. Here we go.
Do you feel like you have a target on your back?
I believe that President Trump wants to seek retribution against me because of my role as special counsel.
Would you be surprised if President Trump directly DOJ to indict you?
No.
So in other words, he's saying, I know the president is probably going to come after me. I know he's going to do political persecution and lawfare and come after me because I'm going after him using the law. And you know what? Bring it on. He's going to come after me. He's going to make me a hero. He's going to make me a martyr. I'm right. I can defend every single thing I'm alleging here. I can defend. This is no wonder they hid this. No wonder they hid this. So here are some of the big quotes for you guys to share. Our investigation developed proof beyond a reasonable doubt that President Trump engaged in a criminal scheme to overturn the results of the 2020 election and to prevent the lawful transfer of power. So all of the bitching and whining and moaning Trump does, where he goes, the Democrats are stealing the election, Biden is stealing the election, the 2020 election was stolen. He's the one who's doing the stealing. Okay? Quote, President Trump willfully retained highly classified documents and then repeatedly tried to obstruct justice to conceal his continued retention of those documents. Quote, we charge President Trump because he was the most culpable person in the effort to criminally overturn the 2020 election, and we had proof beyond a reasonable doubt to support that decision. So in other words, he's the head of the snake. He's the head of the snake, and we can prove it in court. Quote, President Trump and his associates exploited the violence on January 6th to pressure members of Congress to delay certification. I did not choose those members. President Trump did. So even after the violence happened on January 6th, Trump and all of his allies were on the phone telling people, do not certify Joe Biden. Do not certify this election. Quote, if asked whether to prosecute the former president again based on the same facts, I would do so regardless of party. These are some of the amazing quotes from Jack Smith. And finally, I'll end on this. What we're talking about here, guys, is a huge deal. We're talking about conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, obstruction of an attempt to obstruct an official proceeding, and conspiracy against rights to effectively throw out all the votes of the people who voted against you. We knew from the indictment, we learned that Trump acknowledged to one of the co-conspirators, co-conspirator 3 to be exact, that his rigged election claims were, quote, crazy. His words, not mine. Trump knew he was lying. Trump knew what he was saying was, quote, crazy. When he tried to get Mike Pence to overturn the results, and Pence said no, Trump said, quote, you're too honest. Trump worked with co-conspirator 4 to open sham election crime investigations. All of this, guys, all of this was going to be proven by Jack Smith in court. They forced the Justice Department to send letters to the states fraudulently saying they have identified significant concerns that may have impacted the outcome of the election. This is what Trump was trying to do. From the indictment, quote, on January 6th, as violence ensued, the defendant and co-conspirators exploited the disruption by redoubling efforts and trying to convince members of Congress to further delay certification based on false claims. A crime. A crime. Co-conspirator 5 had a memo about the fake electors and called it, quote, the fraudulent elector memo and the, quote, fraudulent elector instructions. Internally, they were saying to each other, are fraudulent electors. So for them to turn around now and go, oh, this isn't fraudulent. This is totally legit. This is totally real. They knew it wasn't real. They knew it wasn't legit. Guys, understand that on December 13th, co-conspirator 1 and 5 had a conversation where they decided that the plan is no longer to do alternate electors, but to do fake electors, regardless of what the courts say. That's the whole ball game right there. That's the whole ball game. And the same day, a senior White House advisor in a meeting with Trump and 2 of the co-conspirators said, I don't know who wants to put their name on this thing because it's, quote, certifying illegal votes. It's certifying illegal votes. So, that's it. Pound the gavel. It's over. It's done. This is just proof beyond any reasonable doubt. Hardcore proof that Trump is a criminal, was engaged in a criminal scheme, and Jack Smith, a neutral and objective and truth-telling prosecutor here, was just going to lay out the case in as dry and factual a way as possible. And according to him, he was absolutely going to win it. So spread this far and wide. This is an incredible story. We cannot let them bury this. And we also cannot let these criminals get away with it in the long run. We just can't do that. Because if we do, then we no longer have a country, and any Republican at any time can try to steal the next election because there were no consequences for when they tried to do it in the past. So it's time for everybody to wake up and realize the demons that we're dealing with here.
Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.